Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds, and it is another edition with returning guest Morgan Beam. Morgan, thank you for joining and talking with me for a few minutes again.
Thanks so much for having me back again.
Of course, of course. You have a really distinctive style. I'm a comics purveyor. I really enjoy all sorts of reading materials, and I think it was Swamp Thing Twin Branches, I think was where I first discovered your work. And it was just so visually striking, and I loved it. And now you have a new book that is about to hit the world, and so curious about what is new. What is new in your creating these days?
The book you mentioned is You Belong Here, which
Hmm.
should be coming out this spring. It is a young adult sort of slice of life book out from First Second and written by my wonderful collaborator, Sarah Miller. And it's a really fun one. You know, it was my first time working in the slice of life genre.
Hmm.
And it's a big book. I think it clocks in right around 250 pages. So also I think my longest graphic novel to date. But I really enjoyed it. And other than that, despite I think it being a quiet announcement year for me, I've been busy working on some stuff in the background that hopefully will also be announced early next year. I'm not sure how much more I can say about those coming up, but
Sure, sure. Well,
oh,
well,
actually,
glad
what
to
I
hear.
can say, actually, because
Yeah.
it was announced, is that Casey Gilly and I are actually working on another book for First Second. I forgot that they did make that the acquisition announcement at least, and it's called Quiet Appetites, and it's going to be a sort of folk horror book. It's going
Ah.
to be beautiful and very disturbing, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds great title and sounds really interesting. And of course, I know with Twin Branches, you have that touch for sort of the spooky, supernatural, surreal. So looking forward to that.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a pretty big horror fan, and Quiet Appetites. If you enjoyed Swamp Thing Twin Branches, will definitely be. It's going to go definitely further, I think, into horror than Swamp Thing did.
Hmm.
But that same sort of like plant, lush, forest kind of folk horror vibe.
Nice, nice. Um, First second, they don't pay me to say this or anything, but I really enjoy and have enjoyed the things that they publish. And You Belong Here just fits in this really nice young adult space that's really hard to kind of nail sometimes. But I love that, and I love that theme of belonging, and love that there's a realism to it that young people can read because high school students very much enjoy the graphic novel format. Many of them do.
Yeah, I was really thrilled to work on this book, being kind of a pure YA book. I grew up, when I was in high school, early college. I read a lot of manga, and I read what I liked about that genre is that you had a lot of those slice of life stories. You know, you had a lot of just like characters in high school and navigating, social obligations and their future and kind of developing your identity. And I do feel like, certainly, at least when we were growing up and still a little bit now, that category is not as robust in American comics as I feel like it should be,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of fun things to explore. And You Belong Here, I think, does a good job of really tackling that. Your last year of high school, your world's kind of rocked, right? Because
Mhm.
everybody you love and that you've established over the years is leaving, and or you're leaving. And so relationships are kind of being broken and redefined, and you're going through this big change because, maybe you'll be done with school and you're getting a job, or like our character, maybe you're thinking about leaving home and moving away for the first time.
Mhm.
And it just really, rocks the ground out from under you. And that's a lot of what You Belong Here touches on.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned the collaboration on it. So what was it? What was it like to work with Sarah Miller on the project?
Oh, it was fabulous. Sarah, I don't know if you know, but Sarah Miller is actually an editor for the YA line at DC. We didn't
Nice,
get to work
nice.
together for Swamp Thing, but she's been my dear friend for many years now. And this was her kind of big debut as a writer. And I mean, she really nailed it with this book. Like the characters are just very real feeling to me and were really well written. And because she'd really put so much love into the script, and I think because she is an editor,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
script was a joy to work from. Like it was really fully formed when I got it. Obviously, she was, into my feedback and I put my own touches on it, but it was just nice to not, so occasionally you get a script that is a little bit more arduous. You kind of have to really parse things out and struggle with, and this one just flowed very easily. So it was a really great collaboration. And again, Sarah has that really winning eye for detail that I think put a really good polish on this book.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it sounds like you had the chance to maybe revisit some high school experiences and 200 plus pages. It sounds like you were also immersed in the book and spending a good bit of time.
Yeah, for sure. With a book that long, I feel like it's funny, it's almost like a friendship in itself, right? The first, oh, I don't know, 20 to 40 pages, you're still kind of getting to know the characters. You're still kind of figuring out who they are, what their personalities are like, the decisions they make. And then probably about, I don't know, a third to halfway through the book, it's like you really know these characters. And that's great because I feel like that's when the art flows really well because you just kind of instinctively know their character acting, right? Like, oh, I know what kind of, she'd be rolling her eyes in the background of this, or,
Hmm.
he'd be fussy about this thing. And you really kind of feel like you have that established relationship, which also then, I mean, when you're done with the book, is almost a little bit of a bummer because it is kind of like saying goodbye to your buddies.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, there's this theme of belonging, and I mentioned that, and I feel like that's a theme that you deal with in different ways all through your life. I'm in midlife right now, or as I tell my students, 129 years old. Um, so I'm curious about how that theme resonated with you as you were working on the book as well.
Yeah, so in two ways. One is just, having been that sort of last year of high school myself, I could remember what that felt like, to be so unsure. Because not only are you just unsure about like the future, have you made the right decision regarding school or your career path or, whatever else, but also like, will your family be okay if you leave? Do you, will your friendships last? How will you make new friends? And then even, when you're that age, which I do feel like also just happens, kind of like you're saying at different moments of your life, you also just have a big question of like kind of facing who you are.
Hmm.
I feel like you go through these moments of very self-assured as like, this is who I am as a person. And you think that like, this is who I am and these are my values and these are the lines I won't cross and these are this, that, and the other
Hmm.
until something
Hmm.
happens and one of those rules gets broken or you do something out of care, or whatever. And then you kind of have to reevaluate like, is this who I am? Is this who
Yeah.
I want to be? And I feel like that, kind of like you're saying about belonging, stays with you through most of your life. Like, unfortunately, if any teens are listening to this, I'm sorry, that doesn't end.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
because you're always growing and you're always changing. And I do think that, it's even the same in adulthood. You get to just these different stages, right? Like maybe you're at the
Hmm.
stage where a bunch of your friends have settled down and have families and you don't. They have kids or they move to take care of parents and you're still there. Like, you kind of still have these like, will my relationships last? How are my relationships defined now that we're both, separate places? It's just, the older you get, you have more experience, and so I think that becomes easier to navigate. But that quest to kind of figure out where you fit in your world and your relationships and even geographically, I think, yeah, is something that kind of comes up as different things change in your life all the time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I will say it feels different.
Mhm.
The feeling of trying to belong or finding belonging as a young adult does feel different. And at the same
Yes,
time, there are those threads that are the same.
because when you're older, you're much more tired.
That's right. That's right.
you
That's right.
you can't care as much because you're just exhausted.
That's right. You're just gonna go to bed anyway. It works. It's fine. It's a
No, no,
good
but
nap
I
time.
but I agree. It does feel, the more life experience you build, the the different things feel, and the more you can kind of rely on yourself because you've been through those situations. I think that's what's really hard about that first big initial shakeup is that, I remember being, 17, 18, and you think you're such an adult, because in some ways you are, but like you really think like, I'm an adult, so I should have this all figured out or whatever. And then, now that, when you're older, like where you realize that like you're just so young, like you're just starting. And that's what hard is because you don't have that experience to kind of springboard off of or know that you'll be okay. It's kind of, for a lot of people, it's kind of the first big time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now you were talking about horror. being sort of the space you've been creating in now as well. So I'm
Mhm.
curious before we get to the final question of what it's like to sort of pivot and move from one space to another creatively like that.
I mean, I enjoy kind of mixing up genres. It keeps things fresh. You don't get bored.
Hmm.
Sometimes, especially if you've been working on one book and one attitude for a long time, when you're done, you're like, I want something completely different.
Yeah.
And that's the wonderful thing about comics is I feel like it provides that space, and that most authors and artists aren't necessarily tied into one genre unless they desire to be. So it is fun to try on different things, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about working with writers too, is that you get to collaborate on stories you probably never would have thought of or picked otherwise, and that can be
Yeah.
really fun and really challenging in really inspiring and great ways. So I enjoy going back and forth, but horror, especially like supernatural or kind of like that kind of like fantasy sci-fi horror, that kind of thing, is like my true heart home. Which is funny because I just did a slice of life, somewhat romance book, but I deeply love, I like creepy things,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
less the like slasher and like gore and just messed up stuff, but that kind of like slow, unnerving, creepy.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Something about it just fills my heart with joy.
Yeah.
uh, so I enjoy all the genres I work on, but I'm very excited for this upcoming book with Casey because I just when she told me the initial story and was like, I have this book, do you want to do it? I just remember being like, this book was made for me. Like
Yeah.
it was like
Yeah.
somebody plucked my specific sort of brand of interests, and formatted a book that way. So I'm just really thrilled that I get to work on it with her.
Cool. Very cool. Well, it sounds like great things coming from you, great things coming from First Second with you. And again, they don't pay me to say that. That's just uh, kind of cool. I always look forward to what they're publishing. If I am a listener out there and I want to find out about either of these projects a little bit more or see something else that you've worked on or will be working on, where are some places that I might go?
Yeah, so if you just want to follow my work in general, social media wise, I'm the most active on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is just my full name, Morgan Beam. I also do have a website that I should probably update a little more often than I do, but it is also just morganbeam.com. If you want to find out more about You Belong Here and in the future, Quiet Appetites, you can also go on First Second's website. They do a good
Mhm.
job of cataloging all their books. And there's places there where it shows you where you can pre-order from if you so desire. So You Belong Here is up for pre-order right now. I believe it'll be out in March. And Quiet Appetites does not yet have a release date or anything, but I will certainly be keeping you posted on that one as I continue to work on it.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. Well, Morgan, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for a second talk, and certainly glad to talk with you in the future as more projects are coming along.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for having me. This is always so great, Jason.
Anytime, anytime. Thanks so much.